all that too. Can I ask Gerry Duffy to join us on stage? And Gerry, you're up. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Can I ask you to stand up for a moment, please? If you've seen this before, please don't give it away. Okay? Can I just ask you to raise your hands as high as you can? As high as you can. Okay, take a seat. You've been sitting there for 2 hours. I just thought you might. I love Tom's message, and I have an equally simple message. But simple, I hope, is not to be confused with not of value. Because personally, I believe this. I'm going to share with you tonight what I believe is one of the top 3 discoveries I've made in the last 49 years. 49 years on the earth. This is in my top 3 discoveries in my life. Who here has or had at one time young children in their house? Okay. So I want to share a really quick story, a made-up story, a fable story about a young child. A young child decides to sign up for a gymnastics or a dancing or a ballet class. And they come home after the first day, and you said, or your wife or husband said, well, how did you get on? Oh God, it was brilliant, it was just fantastic. What did you do? Well, we did this thing called the basics. And what did you do? Well, we just did the basics, but was it any good? It was brilliant, it was so much fun. So a week later, the child comes back, and the parent asks, what was it like this week? It was fantastic. What did you do? Well, we did this thing called the basics, and we did a thing called a routine. And did you enjoy it? I loved it, it was fabulous. And a week later, the same child comes back, well, was it any good this week? Yeah, it was super this week. And what did you do? Well, we did this thing called the basics, and then we did a routine, and then we did a new routine. And then a week later, the child comes back, what was it like this week? It was great, yeah. What did you do? Well, we did the basics, we did the routine, and we did the other routine. And was it good? Yeah, it was great. And a week later, a child comes in, was it any good? Yeah, it was good, yeah. What did you do? Well, we did the basics, and we did the routine, and we did the routine. Okay, and did you enjoy it? Yeah, it was good, yeah. And a week later, a child comes in, what did you do? We did the basics, we did the routine, and we did the routine. Was it any good? Yeah, it was okay, yeah. How did it go this week? It was okay. And a week later, how did it go this week? Come on, like, it's ballet, it's singing, it's dancing. You know what it's like. Well, what did you do? Well, we did the basics, and we did the routine, and we did the routine. And a week later, what was it like? It was okay. What did you do? Well, we did the basics, and we did the routine, and we did the routine. I'm here to speak to you about how do we innovate our lives, and also critically why I believe it's in our interest to innovate our lives. Before I focus on how we innovate our lives, I want to share focus on what I believe is the trap that we tend to fall into in life. And I fell into this trap for 10 years. So I want you to imagine a child or a young child that identifies their dream career, and they go to school and they always want this dream career, so they go to school and they work really hard, then they go to college, they work really hard, and then they come out and they apply for their dream career interview, and they sell themselves brilliantly, and they're one of 500 candidates, and they get their dream career. And the day they get their dream career, the first day walking into the job, their happiness index is up here. It's really high. With most people, if you come back 3 years later, where is their happiness index in that dream career? Do you think, is it there, or is it just there? Where do you think it is for most people? It's just an ounce less, or maybe considerably less. What's happened? I believe what they've done is they've exonated. They've exonated. Now I have a confession to make. 12 hours ago, I'd never heard of the word exonated. But this morning, I said, I'm going to figure out, if I'm going to be asked to speak about innovation, I'm going to look up the opposite to innovation. And apparently the opposite to innovation is exonation. Now don't take that as gospel, I just Googled it and that's what I got after 2 minutes. Apparently we exonate. So in simple terms, what this person has done is they've exonated. Now my simple understanding of exonate is they've asked an ounce less. They've asked an ounce less. But what they didn't just do it once, they might have done it maybe every day, just an ounce. Or maybe just every week, just an ounce. But if every week we just ask an ounce less, and we come back 3 years later, we compress that, that's where we've gone from there to there. And you see, that's what I did. I was this person for 10 years. You see, I left school somewhat very, very ready for life and somewhat hungry for life. But 10 years later, I was actually unrecognizable from that person. And what they've discovered since is you and I are like flowers. We're always doing one of two things. We're either growing or we're dying. we're either growing or we're dying. Now, we probably don't even notice it because we only look at it, if we looked at our lives every 5 years or 10 years in a snapshot, but because we're in our lives every single day, we don't actually notice it's happening. So I want to show you a photograph. I'm 49 years of age, and a photograph taken at 27, where I suddenly realised, gosh, Gerry, you know, what are you doing with your life? Because I realised when this photograph was taken, I had to look myself in the mirror, and I said, what are you doing with your life? Because you're not happy. So I had a photograph taken, and I didn't realise until years later, even though I made change straight away, I didn't realise until years later the impact that this photograph had on my life. Because every journey and every new journey starts somewhere, and I didn't realise that it was going to happen in July of 1995. But it did, because this is the photograph that was taken. I'm in that photograph. I'm the guy on the right-hand side of the photograph. Does anybody recognise the man on the left? Who doesn't recognise the man on the left? Yeah, a few people. So, because sadly Sevi's time has passed. Sevi died at the age of 54. Who was he for the people that don't know? Golfer. Was he any good? Yeah, he was fabulous. Yeah. He was officially the greatest golfer on the planet for a period of about 6 or 7 years. He was also my hero. But this was the day, I knew for a week in advance I was going to meet this man. But when I got the photograph developed, all I wanted to do was tear it up. Because I looked at myself and I realised, you see, I'd left school the weight I am today, and I'd left school a non-smoker. In that photograph, I'm 4.5 stone heavier than I am today. 4.5 stone heavier than when I left school. And I smoked 50 cigarettes that day. I'd never noticed it happening. You see, I had one cigarette, but then I didn't stop. Then I went back the next day and I had another cigarette at 17. Then I had 2 cigarettes, 3 cigarettes, 5 cigarettes. And then I had to buy my own cigarettes because my friends wouldn't give me any more cigarettes. But I never noticed it happening. 10 years later, I'm 30 cigarettes every single day, social days, 50 cigarettes. So this is who I'd become. So I decided, as a result of this photograph, to make change in my life. I'm just going to get rid of that for a few minutes. You see, I'd fallen into the trap. Here's the trap I'd fallen into. And I learned this from a man called Les Brown. He said there's a man walking down the street one day, and he sees this man sitting outside a shop. And he's on this rocking chair, and there's a dog beside him. And as the passerby is walking by, he hears the dog moaning and groaning. So he stops, and he inquires about the health of the dog. And he said, is your dog okay? And he said, yes, he's fine. So he keeps on walking, but as he goes to walk away, the dog lets out a bigger moan and groan. So the passerby comes back, and he says to the guy in the chair, are you sure your dog is okay? And he said, yes. Why? Because he keeps moaning and groaning. Oh, don't worry about him. He's sitting on a nail. Sitting on a nail. And why doesn't he move? Because it's not hurting enough. It's not hurting enough. And many of us, and me included, for 10 years, it was hurting, but it wasn't hurting enough. But that photograph, just for me personally, you might look at that photograph and not see what I see or what I saw 22 years ago, but I saw somebody that was not making the most of their life. I saw somebody that suddenly, I looked at myself for the first time in years, and I saw the sum of all those explanations. And I saw somebody that was 4.5 stone heavier than when they left school, and I saw somebody that was probably going to be dead within 20 years if he kept just asking another answer less. So I decided as a result of that photograph to make a tiny change, a tiny stretch. And it led me into a completely different direction in my life. I heard a lady at the Pendulum Summit. If anybody was at the Pendulum Summit earlier this year, anybody there? Lee was there. A lady called Lisa Nichols. She said, you've got to make it non-negotiable. Whatever it is you want to achieve in life, you've got to make it non-negotiable. And I only heard that last January. But what I realized, and what I'd done was 22 years ago, I said, enough is enough. I'm going to make this non-negotiable. So I made change my life non-negotiable. So how do we achieve more? How do we become happier? How do we perform better? How do we reach things that are up there? What do we need to do? And this is what I've discovered. This is the top 2 discoveries of my life. Now, some cynics might say, Gerry, for God's sake, that's ridiculous. Like, that's so simple. But I believe it's incredibly valuable. I've seen incredible value in this in my life. I'm not saying you're going to get the same impact, but for me, this was life-changing. And for me, I continually do it. I've been doing it for 22 years. And lots of times I've done exactly what Tom said. I failed, but I've discovered that the failure is often the best thing. I failed something huge last year, huge. And by God am I glad I failed now. I cried non-stop for 2 days when I failed. But by God am I glad now because of what I discovered. But anyway, can I ask you again, if you don't mind, just to stand up again? Thank you. So I'd like you to raise your hands. If you've seen it before, please don't give it away. Just to raise your hands as high as you can. As high as you can. As high as you can. Okay, take a seat again. So how do we achieve more? How do we get higher levels of happiness? How do we reach a higher standard in anything? We've just done it. So what was I asking you to do physically? Well, physically, how would you describe it? What were we doing? Raising our hands. What I've discovered is, you see, people say opportunity knocks once in a lifetime. I've discovered opportunity knocks every single day. If we did it again, I was looking for a very specific standard from everybody in this room. And it's only a bit of tough love and it's only a bit of fun tonight, but you have just told me that that's the limit of your ability. Because I was looking for a very specific standard. What standard was I looking for?
Best.
The best. As high as you can. You see, we have very few evidence of all we need to do to achieve anything we want in life. All we have to do is stretch. That's all we have to do. But for some reason, many of us, me included for 10 years, I stopped stretching. You see, we all did it. We all have clear evidence that we can achieve anything we want to, because we know we can do the thing that we need to do, which is to stretch. Because if I take you back to when you were 5 years of age, I want you to go back to your classroom at 5 years of age. If I set you the challenge I just set you a moment ago, what would you have done at 5? You would have stood on your tippy toes. What else would you have done? Stood in a chair. What else would you have done? Would you have done it like this? Would you have jumped on the table? And if you didn't think of the table and your best friend stood on the table, is it fair to say that you couldn't get up there quick enough to join them? Is that a fair comment? But you see, this is a metaphor for life. What I've discovered is I have clear evidence I can achieve far greater things than I might be telling myself at 49 I can achieve. All I have to do is stretch. But you see, at stretch, look, I'm stretching. I'm at my absolute limit. But you see, at 5, you wouldn't have given up. You would have persisted like Tom did. And you would have been willing to think outside the box. And that's what I've discovered. If I want to achieve more, all I have to do is stretch. And just when I think I'm at my limit, I just remind myself of what I would have done when I was 5. At 5, I wouldn't have given up. At 5, I would have discovered in the space of a minute how to go twice as tall. And all you have to do is ask an ounce more. Ask an ounce less, ask an ounce more. I took up running at the age of 27. And I stretched myself to 3 or 4 miles. I stretched myself to 7 miles. I stretched myself to 10 miles. I got up to half marathon. And then I decided to do a marathon. But I also got something else. I started to experience something that I wasn't expecting to experience. Yes, I achieved more, but I got something else. Something incredible. And you see, if we go back to that child from 10 minutes ago, the child that's doing the gymnastics or the dancing, you see, that child, let's assume that was a 6-week journey. Week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then, Dad, like it's dancing. It's like, you know what it is. Like, in fact, I'm thinking of giving it up. But you see, if you encompass that as a 6-week window, that entire experience, for the first 4 weeks, the child was experiencing the additional magic that stretching gives us. The child was experiencing growth. And what I've discovered is higher levels of happiness come from growth. If I go into work every day and I don't stretch, just watch what happens to my motivation. So I've discovered the magic is in never stopping. People assume, sure, 45, 50, why would you want to continually innovate? And it's not about, for some people it's about making more money, but for other people it's about finding new ways to do all things. I've ran many, many marathons in my life, and somebody said to me recently, why would you bother running a marathon? But I did a marathon about 3 years ago that was way behind my fastest ever marathon, but I got as much happiness out of it because I found a new way to do all things. I paced one of my closest friends to a personal best in his marathon. So we can find such inventive ways to do all things. Here's the reason why. Here's another incredible discovery I've got. In fact, it's the most important discovery of my life. At 27, I woke up. At 27, I woke up to the most important piece of information that is in my head. This is my top one. I became consciously aware of the fact that I'm alive. what a gift to actually become consciously aware, because I wasn't aware of this fact. I was passively aware for 10 years, but I woke up. And then I started to stretch myself, and my happiness index started to rise. And you see, happiness comes from growth, so I'm very determined to continue to achieve goals for the rest of my life. If I live to be 50 or 100, I'll continue to strive for goals. It just means that I have to be continually going, like I've done, maybe if you do 2 marathons in 2 days, you've got to do 3 in 3. You can find new ways to do old things. But what I did do was I came up with a list, because I believe we have to have a list. And most people, in my experience, I do a lot of workshops, and I say, who here has a list? And I say, what list? List of things you want to achieve in your life. My average is about 5% of audiences have a list of things they want to achieve in their life. But if the powers that you believe in woke you up tomorrow morning and said, today's your final day, you would suddenly have a list. Is that a fair comment to make? We'd all have a list really quickly. Well, I didn't know that was today. I've got to do this, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do this. So I came up with a list many, many years ago, and this was the list. These 5 things at that time, these became the most important things in my life. And I said, I want to reach the highest standard I possibly can with these 5 things. Family, work, endurance, sports, contribution, and health. I wanted to become the best, as Tom said, the best that I could be, as I defined it. So at the time, endurance sport, I'd never ran a marathon. So I signed up for my first ever marathon. And that really stretched me. I failed a lot in that experience, but I continually learned. So sometimes, Colin O'Brien, does anybody know Colin O'Brien from Limerick? Sometimes I win, sometimes I learn. Great expression that Colin wrote about in his book. But I did this marathon, and then I realized I could do that, but I had to stretch to do it. And then I came up with a loftier goal, which was to do an Ironman triathlon. Has anybody here done triathlons? Yeah, a few people into this. So Ironman triathlons, you swim, cycle, and run for a really long time. That's what an Ironman triathlon is. So I'm actually in that photograph. That's a photograph of my first ever Ironman triathlon. I'm just in the centre in the orange hat. But I did that, and I discovered the magic of, you see, this is about making the most, the years in your life, or the life in your years. You know, I found out the life in your years is just so valuable. That was the most incredible experience for 4 days. My whole family was out there, my parents were out there. We had an incredible experience that I will remember. If I was dying tomorrow, that would be one of my first things I would think about. I would say, well, remember that day. What a magical day. You see, at 24, 25, 26, I wasn't having those kind of days. In fact, I can't even remember too much about those kind of days. But now I try and make the most of my days. A couple of years after that, I got an idea to run a marathon every day for 32 consecutive days. And people say, how on earth do you do that? All you do is stretch a little bit more. I'm no more talented to run a marathon every day for 32 days than you are. This is just a metaphor for whatever is on your list. And you see, the list was a very, very finite list. When I first came up with the list, it was 25 things on the list. But you see, 25 things is a lot of things. The 5 things I showed you were the most important on the list. The things I was most passionate about. So I wanted to be excellent at 20 things, but I wanted to be outstanding at those 5 things. Family, work. Because I spend 23.8% of my life at work. That's a hell of a long time. And what I've discovered is I will be as happy in work as I decide I'm going to be. Family, work, endurance sports, contribution, and health. So I got this idea to run the marathons. All I did was stretch. But you see, if you decide, if you're here in life and you decide to ask an ounce less, or decide to ask an ounce more, ask an ounce less, or ask an ounce more, ask an ounce less, just an ounce, or ask an ounce more, ask an ounce less, or ask an ounce more, ask an ounce, just an ounce less, or ask an ounce more. Look at the difference in the destinations. It's incredible. And that's how you run 32 marathons in 32 days. It is that straightforward. Did we hit many, many walls? The guy in the blue did it with me, Ken Whitelaw. We hit 1,000 walls. We failed so many times with that. But we ultimately succeeded in our ultimate goal. But we had to go through the failures. Sometimes there was so many failures because we were logistically trying to put on a really big event, because there was more to it than just 2 guys running 32 marathons. It was a big charity event as well. So that's how we achieve more. I want to share, how long have I got? Another 5 minutes and that's it? Is that okay?
That's perfect.
Is that okay? Okay, good. So how do we achieve our true potential? That's how we achieve more. How do we achieve our true potential while we're on the earth? And this is one of my goals, to achieve my true potential. So in order to demonstrate this, I'm going to ask you really quickly, if you don't mind, I want you to move seats. I I want you to take all your belongings, take your water, and go to a completely different city. Would that be okay? You guys are going to love this, because you might get one of the company chairs.
I'm going to go near the streets.
Everybody's heading for the sweets now.
All right. Okay. So I shared with you, for me, I've discovered how I can achieve my true potential while I'm on the earth. So if I was to measure you scientifically about a minute and a half ago, in terms of your motivation, is she motivated to move or is she motivated to stay? Is he motivated to move to a different chair or is he motivated to stay? Which do you think you would have been?
Motivated.
Stay or go?
Stay.
Apart from the people sitting over there. Stay or go?
Stay.
Stay.
Go.
Go. I've discovered our success in life, how we achieve our true potential. The only way I believe, it's just an opinion, and opinions are opinions. But I've discovered my success in life is determined by how, this is really simple. But it doesn't mean it's easy, because it's far from easy. But our success in life is determined by how uncomfortable you and I are prepared to get. So that moving seats is just a metaphor for moving as we journey through life, getting uncomfortable as we get through life. In reality, it's just bigger stretches. That's all it is. But I'd like to think, the reason I'm certain of this for me, that this is how I tap into my true potential, is I'm very fortunate in what I do. So I speak in particular areas. I speak for a living. That's what I do. I work in the corporate sector and train in particular fields of expertise where I feel and companies feel I have value to help them. I spoke earlier this year to a group of 4,000 people. Now the reason I share that with you is this, for one reason and one reason only. 12 years ago, I did something completely different. 12 years ago, I was so pathologically fearful of public speaking. I had to go to a hypnotist to give me the courage to address an audience of 4 people. By God, am I glad I got uncomfortable. Now, believe me, I was terrified. I did it in 2005. The fear went away in 2011. I decided in 2009 I actually wanted to do it for a living. Sometimes we wonder, why on earth? I don't want to move. Why should I move? I questioned that in September 2005 when I was pathologically fearful after speaking. I said, why do I really need to put myself through this? But you see, I discovered the magic in life is in stretching. And I just saw this as the biggest stretch of my life. I was terrified. What I've discovered is that if you have the courage to move, because it might be courage, or if you have the motivation or the inspiration to move, and sometimes to move when you mightn't want to move, sometimes to move when you really don't want to move, but if you're willing to move, and I'd like to think I'm testament to it, because now it's actually my business. What I've discovered is small keys can open really big doors. If you have the courage, if courage is the word, to put the key in the door. For me, it was life-changing. And yet it was just a simple, not an easy, but a simple stretch. And now, if you told me 12 years ago, I would be doing what I'm doing for a living. I loved what I did 12 years ago, but I adore what I do now. And yet I'm now doing something that used to be pathologically terrifying. And it did that for 2 years when I was speaking full-time. I used to still be terrified, but I kept stretching, kept failing, kept stretching, kept learning. I kept stretching. I refused to stop stretching. And that's what I've discovered. That's where the magic is. And now the fear is completely gone away. There's another very close associate of mine, Eamon O'Brien, is here somewhere. Eamon does exactly what I do. Where is he? Eamon does it. We're both members of the Professional Speakers Association. And so Eamon and I connect quite often. But I know Eamon does exactly what I do, and I know a lot he does it. And this is just what we do. What you do is what you do. But I discovered the secret to sustain motivation. To sustain motivation is you got to keep stretching. If you're going to spend 23.8% of your life at work, I would hugely encourage you to continue to stretch. So how will you know if you're stretching or not? Here's a really simple, this is what it will feel like. So just fold your arms for a second if you don't mind. This is what it will feel like. This is how you'll know if you're stretching yourself or not. So if this is what you do, this is what it should feel like every week. Are you ready? It shouldn't feel like that. It should feel like this. Are you ready? Fold them the other way for a second. How does that feel? A little bit hard to get used to? A little bit awkward, a little bit, what am I doing here?
You can't do it.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you for saying that, because I thought I couldn't speak. But I discovered...
Oh, I can talk for Ireland.
So here's the thing. Anybody interested in stretching while they're in calm? Who would be interested in stretching while they're in calm? Okay, if you're up for it, and you don't have to do this, but I have a challenge for you. Would you be up for a challenge? Okay, so in order to buy into the challenge, I'm going to ask you, and apologies, I know I'm probably 5 minutes over, so apologies.
Not on. It's okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He's
Knock
gone. So you're going to need a pen, but I brought some pens if you need a pen. Okay. So if you just take one, if you don't mind, I just take one sticker. Don't peel it off the sticky bit yet, though, if you don't mind. So I'm going to pass them around, and you will need a pen. So if you need a pen, just raise your hand. Who here needs a pen? There we go. And I'll explain what this is about in 1 second, and then I promise when I'm done then. Is that okay? Okay. Anybody else? Yep. Anybody else need a pen? Oh, lots of people need a pen. Can I throw it? Is that okay?
Yeah, I lost them around.
That's great. Yeah. One more. There you go. Okay. I want you to think of something. Has everybody got the sticker? It's still going around probably, is it? Sticker still going around?
Yeah.
Okay, while the sticker's going around, I want you to think of something that you want to improve in your life. Anything at all. I'm not going to ask what it is, it's none of my business. Something that you might be keen to improve in your life. Something that you know you could improve straight away. Might be a phone call, or it could be an online purchase, could be signing up for something, could be speaking to somebody at CongRegation, could be speaking tomorrow morning, I don't know. But something that will stretch you that you could do while you are here. What would be the first stretch on the journey? And you might need to go home for this. It might be just picking up the phone and making a stretching phone call, isn't it? What's one thing you could do to get closer to the thing that you have now thought in your head that you want to achieve, you want to get better at? Has everybody got something? Yeah? So I want you to think, what could you do tomorrow? What could you do before you leave here? A stretch, a simple stretch. It doesn't have to be a big stretch, just a little stretch, but a stretch nonetheless. So I encourage you to capture it on that sticker, if that's okay. Whatever it is that but something that you could do before you leave Cong, whether it's tomorrow or Sunday or even beyond Sunday. Something you know you could do, and you will be so glad by the time you get back to wherever home is for you, you will be so glad you had this done, because it will start you on that journey. So I'd like you to capture it on that dot, whatever it is, on that sticker. Have you got that one? Apologies, I didn't capture it. And wait at some point. So I'm going to encourage you just to write it on the dot. And then I'm going to recommend, now the perfect place might be, but you decide to stick it on the lanyard, please stick it on your watch, stick it on your phone, or whatever it is. But if you stick it there, okay, you have to do it. Is that okay? So you decide if you're going to stick it there. No? Stick it somewhere. Is that okay? But stick it on the lanyard, stick it on the strap, stick it on your watch, the wrist of your watch, the strap, stick it on your phone, handbag, or whatever. But I'd encourage you to do it, because I've done that many times in my life, and I find them life-changing. They're really simple to me, because every journey starts somewhere. And sometimes we look for really complex solutions, when in actual fact they're just tiny stretches. What I've discovered is this is not me, I read this somewhere. There are 3 types of people in the world. Those who say it can't happen, those who make it happen, and those who ask, what happened? Number 2 is my favourite, those who make it happen. So I would encourage you to be number 2. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gerry. It's always to finish up after 2 hours.